Also, would like to note that in the chat link, there is a link to the Community Boating Center donation page if you would like to make a donation to the organization tonight. With that, I'd like to introduce our program. The Captain's a Woman. In the shipping industry, Captain Dempsey is a legend, a woman of many firsts. She was the first woman to graduate from U.S. Maritime or Military Academy, completing her courses in 1976. The 4-year program at Maine Maritime Academy in just 2.5 years. Wow. She then went on to become the first American woman to hold a Master Mariner's license. From there, she became the first woman captain of a vessel in wartime, entering the U.S. Navy's Meritorious Public Service Award for her service on the MV Lara during the Persian Gulf War. She then became the first woman Columbia River pilot, the toughest pilotage in America. Before attending Maine Maritime Academy, Captain Dempsey also obtained a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Vermont. Her passion lies in teaching others how to recreate safely on the water, leading her to help start the Community Boating Center on Bellingham Bay, and she presently serves the board of directors as treasurer. It's been said she has salt water in her veins and is definitely more comfortable afloat than ashore. Captain Dempsey also co-authored the book, The Captain's a Woman. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Captain Dempsey.
Good evening, folks, and thanks for having me. You know, there's a big problem with being the first. You hope to hell you're not the last. And so as far as the maritime schools and the merchant marine, there certainly are women out there. But as far as the Columbia River bar pilots, I haven't seen another woman yet, but we're working on it. So let me share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. What's that mean, Frank?
Oh, I'm sorry. Shoot, hold on a second. That's me. I apologize. Screen share. You should be able to.
I've got to correct Frank on one item. He stated that I was a Columbia River pilot. No, I'm a Columbia River bar pilot. There's actually quite a difference in that, which I'll be glad to explain to you all a little bit later.
You should have the helm now.
All right. Let's see. Is that showing up?
Not yet. There we go. Excellent.
Right. Well, it's about shipping, right? So what's this baseball team here? As you can see, perhaps on the right-hand side, there's this girl that's being looked at. When I was 12 years old, I loved to play baseball. And I've got 2 younger brothers that my dad coached in Little League. But during the games in 1962, so you do know how old I am, I had to sit in the dugout and just keep score for the team. I could practice with them, but I couldn't play. Well, one day my dad ran out of pitchers, and for sure, he knew I was a better pitcher than anybody else on the team. And I went to the mound, warmed up, pitching like hell, and came time for a batter to come up and bat against me. No one did. And the parents of the other team literally booed me off the field. I went back to the dugout, and I'm sure my father felt awful. And I think that's what led to just being successful big time from then on. There were no hurdles. If there were, we jumped them. And what's happened, trying to break into the Little League teams, on my nephew's team, the best player on their team was a girl. It happened to be a neighbor of ours. So in Connecticut, I grew up on the mouth of the Connecticut River, very active boating in Essex, Connecticut. My parents and all their pals started a junior sailing academy in 1952. And we all built the 13.5-foot Sparkman Stevens Blue Jay in our garages. And even today, Pettipog Junior Sailing Academy is going strong. And there is a fleet of Blue Jays. It's quite fun, in addition to the 505s and the 420s and all the hotshot dinghy racing. But you can tell I was probably in charge then too. When I graduated from the University of Vermont, I majored in chemistry. And I took all the pre-med requirements, was actually probably looking at going on to med school, or my dad was a pharmacist and he certainly thought one of his 5 kids would inherit the pharmacy. I came the closest. But by the time I reached my senior year, I was sick of the physical sciences and decided to become a bum and delivered yachts for 3 seasons from the East Coast, New England, down to Florida, Haiti, the Caribbean, and taught skiing in the 4th season. And after that, a friend of my dad's found him behind the prescription counter and said to him, "Why doesn't Debbie go up to Maine Maritime Academy and learn what she really wants to know?" And this was 1973. A big part of this story is the Title IX Act of 1972, which allowed for equal at universities and colleges. So the maritime academies knew they would be hit with women sooner or later. And I looked into it and I asked for an application, called them, and you receive this application that is totally one singular gender, the male gender. So I just changed it to suit mine and had my high school and my University of Vermont send transcripts and paid the fee and went about delivering the West Sail 32 from Vermont to Haiti. We happened to be the demo boat for the Annapolis Boat Show that October of 1973. And we were there for a couple of weeks, and I actually got a call from Maine Maritime Academy asking me to come up for an interview. So I left the boat, went up, I think by train, up to Maine, had the interview, was there all day long. And they asked me to call about 4 days later and check in because they were going to have a Board of Trustees vote to decide to change to admit women. So I did call and they told me, "You're in." The vote was yes, and we'd like you to start January of 74, do everything in 2.5 years, transfer the liberal arts requirements that you can from University of Vermont, and double up on 1 semester, double up in the summer, cadet shipping, followed by the academy cruise on their training ship, and graduate in 2.5 years. You have to take every single Coast Guard course. And that is exactly what I did. And I ended up graduating valedictorian of the class in April 30th of 1976. When I graduated, it was a down cycle in shipping. And with that, in my class of 80, only 8 of us had jobs on our licenses being deck officer, 3rd mate in the deck department, or 3rd assistant engineer down in the engine room. And it was all with US flag oil. The problem with that is being limited to the US coast as far as I was concerned. Plus sniffing fuel oil, or if you're on a chemical tanker carrying 10 to grades of different stuff, benzene and all the rest of it, it's quite odious. And this is the type of ship that I was a cadet on, and to work dry cargo deep sea was where I wanted to be. But I did work for Exxon for a year and a half. The union books opened up in the spring of '77. I even tried to use the trump card, whoops, I shouldn't say that word, being my gender, and to get into the union, but they told me I could wait until the books opened up, and that's what I did. So I joined Master Mates and Pilots, which you had to do in order to work with Lykes Brothers Steamship Company, a company based in New Orleans, started in 1895 by 7 brothers of the Lykes family. They had cattle ranches in the Tampa area in Florida. And to transport their beef to the West Indies, they started a shipping company, Lykes Brothers Steamship Company. All their ships were named after family members, and it's a Southern family, and they're really cool. Like there was the Zoella Lykes, the Adabel, the Almeria, the Marjorie, the Amy. It was names I hadn't heard before, so it was quite fun. These ships you don't see anymore. These are the old time ships. Now everything's, fast turnaround and all that. These ships you'd spend, days in port, working the ship, loading the ship, offloading the ship. And it was really quite fun. These were considered the fun ships. Carried bagged flour. A lot of the times, if you're going to the Mediterranean, every single trip you'd go to Alexandria, Egypt. And this was some of the cargo that would get taken there. This cargo was actually loaded. This is wood coming back from Malaysia. And we loaded this, and this is for bowling alleys in the United States. It was just so much fun. We were at anchor in a river, and the cargo came to us by barge, and the crew would set up their kitchen on the fantail of the ship to cook their meals and wash up. And if you made repeated trips in and out of these ports, like into Livorno, Italy here, I've got great friends in Livorno, Italy. You see them, trip after trip. You get to visit them on vacation if you want, or you go ashore and have meals with them and get to know their families. I'm still in touch with Sabrina Nannucci, whose dad was actually our agent. So there's a story about going into Livorno, Italy. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but when I started sailing master, there ended up being 2 captains for Lykes Brothers Steamship Company whose last name was Dempsey. And in the wintertime, trying to get into the port of Livorno can be very difficult. You have to to pick up the pilot, sometimes they can't come outside the breakwater, and you have to take the ship in, make a right angle turn, and hook up the 4 tugs, and the pilot comes aboard then. But in foul weather, trying to make that right angle turn without tug assist is not easy. Well, there are 2 captains that did do this within the Lykes fleet, and both their names ended in Dempsey. This particular load was, we were bringing back the offshore racing boat fleet from Miami, Florida, back to Italy. On top of, and this is obviously a container ship, this is not a self-containing ship. The Marjorie Lykes was self-containing. We could rig up the booms however we wanted to load the cargo, as much as they usually had a heavy lift boom on there that could lift 80-ton lift. And here, these are containers that are dependent on the gantry cranes in the ports. And of course, you had to load the flatbed and then load the cradle and load the boat on that and then tie it all down. Some ports, they're not as adept at handling your cargo as others. It's the longshoremen, the local longshoremen that are operating your cargo gear. And this was happened to be in Egypt, and sure as shoot, the wires parted and into the hatch it fell. But they did clean up the mess and ended up with some spare parts for the rest of the cargo. Brahma bulls, you know, going to Cape Town, South Africa. We loaded this Ferdinand in Texas, Houston, Texas, and offloaded him in Cape Town, South Africa. He happened to be loaded in the well deck being between the bulwark and the hatch over here. And we hit some bad weather, took a good sea over the port quarter and actually stove in one end of his pen. We slowed the ship down, hooked up the cargo gear and lifted him up and placed him dead center of the hatch. You know, zoos would be transported by ship. And of course, depending on the number of animals, you had to have a vet. But in this particular case, the boatswain was the one that had the duty of cleaning out Ferdinand's pen. This was a really cool trip. It's fabulous cargo. These are locomotives that were loaded in Erie, Pennsylvania. Each one of these locomotives weighs 49.8 tons. And this is one of those jumbo booms I was talking about right here. That's an 80-ton lift. So how do you lift a 49.8 ton? This gear right here happens to be 35-ton gear. And the single whip, we could rig up to a 15-ton. And these locomotives were being taken to Sfax, Tunisia. This is how you lift a 49.8-ton locomotive. This is a really cool shot, folks. This is fun. And we also carried the wheel assemblies, which we'd place on the tracks and then the locomotive on the wheel assemblies. This is called this is the sling. This is the 35-ton. This is the 15-ton. This is the equalizing bar. The trick is to keep that bar pretty level. You've got a longshoreman operating the gear on the forward end of the hatch and a longshoreman operating the gear on the after end of the hatch. And it's just like you would experience on a seesaw. Put the heavy guy on the short end of the board. Where do you go? You know, you go when you literally some of the trips that we made with Lykesborough Steamship Company were trips around the world. And our ships carried 12 passengers. If you carried 13, you had to have a doctor on board. And so we only carried 12. And the chief mate served as the medical officer. But we'd go into the Reunion Islands in the Indian Ocean. And you'd have to, you know, a typhoon was coming through. We have to leave for 3 days, come back. And the cool thing about it was they were day workers and they only worked 8 to 5. So yes, you're absolutely right. The crew went ashore and had some playtime. Go to places like Midway Island. Midway Island happens to have a par 3 championship golf course. This is the first tee, I think. And look out for the Goonie birds. Rescues at sea. You know, it's not very often that you did this, but now and then, yes. We were headed to South Africa from the Gulf of Mexico, probably from Houston. And we got into the Caribbean, and second mate, taking morning stars, spotted this on the horizon. We slowed the ship down, came alongside. They were hailing us and learned that they had been adrift for 22 days from St. Lucia. They went out fishing one Sunday afternoon, could not get their motor started, and drifted 535 miles from St. Lucia. We actually picked them up and took them into the island just south of St. Lucia in the Grenadines and offloaded them. I had actually been there on a sailboat, taking a 40-foot Morgan to the Grenadines for some people in Essex, Connecticut. And here we are going in with a 595-foot ship and into this yacht harbor to offload these 3 people. It was quite fun. I don't think St. Vincent had ever seen that. And I got to tell you, folks, I do give a lot of talks, or have in the past, and it's quite different. You have to excuse me. It's quite different talking to a screen and not having that live interaction with you all, but we'll get there. Container ships. You know, the world has changed from the break bulk dry cargo to container ships. And Lykes Brothers Steamship Company kind of got into the container ship trade business late in the game. And they bought some ships and converted them into container ships. The ship of the Marjorie Lykes was actually lengthened once they could see, built in the 60s, and then lengthened in the late 70s when the container ship trade was coming in. They added a container hatch right forward of the house. But this is how containers are loaded. This is how containers are tied down with these stays here. You have to work the stresses, the racking stresses, and it's possible, you know, all the weights of these containers are entered into a stability program. The object of the game is to keep the ship upright. You put too many of the heavy boxes up top, your center of gravity is too high. As you burn the fuel oil going across the ocean, you have to arrive with a positive GM, metacentric height, which is a measure of your stability. And a lot of times when you come into port, the name of the game is to get out as fast as you can, load that cargo and get out. These are liner services. These are scheduled trips. When you interrupt that schedule, you really throw a chink in the system, and it's hard to catch up. Weather gets in the way, all kinds of things gets in the way. The Columbia River has actually lost its container ship trade because of the bar closures that happen with heavy weather. And that's a real cost to the Port of Portland. And you arrive in port, the stow is done for you, prefigured, but you sign off on it before you sail. And hopefully you can get it into your own system and check it for fuel burn in order to get to the other side. I myself, being in the position of having to sign that document, actually turned down some cargo when we were on the Northern Europe run. I heard about it, but it was certainly supported that we could not arrive in Newark, New Jersey with positive GM. Roll-on, roll-off ships. You know, this is the ship I actually sailed my first trip as master on, as captain. the motor vessel Lyra. It's a 620-foot, really and truly just a big parking garage. Three layers and 3 decks inside, and then the top deck. This is a huge stern ramp that you can slew it to either side and open it up, and drive at that point in time, I think we were under charter going to the Persian Gulf crisis and going into Saudi Arabia. And you load the M1 tanks, you just drive them on, you drive the Chinook helicopters on, you drive the trucks on, and then you tie it down and off you go. These, when I first started working for Lykes Brothers Steamship Company, it was new for them to have a woman. I was their first female cadet. I was their first female third mate. And when I got my second mate's license, in order to upgrade, you must do 365 days of actual sailing on each grade and go take a week of exams to get your next level up. And you can't just go sail 365 days in 1 year. It takes a few years to get 365 days of actual sailing. And the second mate's job back in those days when we were what called 4-mate ships, the chief mate did not stand to watch. The second mate's job was considered the navigator of the ship, which for me was really cool. You get the 4 to 8 watch in the morning, 4 to 8 watch in the evening. You're taking morning stars and you're taking evening stars. Yes, we still use sextants then to determine our position. And as a matter of fact, I have about 3 of them. And my graduation present from Maine Maritime Academy was the chief mate of the training vessel. My parents bought his sextant and it was given to me for graduation. What I did with that particular sextant, which happens to be a Plath, is there's a girl that graduated from Maine Maritime Academy in 2005. Her name is Sandy Bendixson. She happened year and a half ago to become the first Puget Sound woman pilot, Captain Sandra Bendixson. In 2005, when she graduated, I sent my sextant to the president of the school, who, when I was in school in 1974, 5, 6, was the assistant athletic coach. And Lenny Tyler was a terrific president because he became everything from being the assistant athletic coach in between to being president of the school. So I sent my sextant to Lenny Tyler to present to Sandy Bendixson on prize day. She still has that sextant. When I became second mate, I was having a tough time getting a job. And I always, to work Lykes for the Steamship Company, I'd have to go down to New Orleans and ghost the hall. And being low on the totem pole with seniority in the union, being Group C, I had to give way to Group B and Group A. But when I got my second mate's license, I actually got a call from the company. I was at my parents' house in Essex, Connecticut, asking me if I could get to the union hall by 8 o'clock the next morning. I could have the second mate's job on the Amy Lykes. So of course I packed up, got a flight out at 2 a.m., something like that, cleared the union hall at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the Amy Lykes happened to be laid up down on the levee with a few other Lykes Brothers ships. When I got out of the rental car, hefted my sea bag over my shoulder, I noticed on the fantail of the Amy Lykes a gentleman leaning on the rail. I climbed up the gangway. I was greeted at the head of the gangway by another deck officer. His name happened to be Chuck Norfleet. He was a third mate. graduated in 1976 from the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which is the federal Merchant Marine Academy. In order to go to what's called Kings Point, you must get a congressional appointment, just like going to the Naval Academy, in order to attend. Here's a 1976 third mate from Kings Point. I'm Debbie Dempsey, a 1976, then Debbie Doane, 1976 grad from Maine Maritime Academy with my second mate's license. Yes, that's the foundation for a problem for that trip. And the trip is going to South and East Africa. So I introduced myself to Chuck Norfleet. Little did I know he had been sent by the gentleman leaning on the fantail rail, go help the cadet with her luggage. And of course, Chuck Norfleet, when he learned who I was, went back and told the guy leaning on the rail, that's no cadet, that's your second mate. The guy leaning on the rail's response was, it is like hell. And he called the company, and Elroy Hartman, head of the purser's department, answered the phone. And Captain Jack Dempsey said to him, what are you doing putting a woman on my ship? Elroy Hartman said, who? Debbie? Oh, hell, Jack. Make a trip with her. You're gonna love her. And sure as shoot, as it turns out, Jack Dempsey and I were married for 18 years before he died in 1996 of cancer. He was one hell of a mentor for me going up through the ranks. When we decided that we were going to get married, actually, when we got back from that first trip, South and East Africa, 4 months later, Jack went up to the office, and Jack Dempsey was not a fair-haired boy with Lykes Brothers Steamship Company, especially with the vice president of the Marine Division, who is ultimately our boss in the deck department. Ernie Hendricks did not like Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey never even graduated from high school, much less a fancy-dancy maritime academy. Jack Dempsey ran away from home when he was 15, forged his birth certificate so he could go to sea. Worked his way up through the hawse pipe, as it's called. Started out cleaning the plates in the engine room, probably. And ended up becoming the senior captain with Lykes before he died. When Jack went in there and told Ernie Hendricks, you guys are right, I like that girl so much, I'm going to marry her. Ernie Hendricks broke the pencil he was holding at his desk. And he told Jack, you marry her, you and she will never ever sail together, and she will never ever sail chief mate with this outfit. So we went about our business, and I actually had to sit in the union hall for about 3 months trying to get a job. And New Orleans happens to be a dry cargo port. Anybody that wants to work on a tanker goes to Port Arthur, Texas. Well, one of the Lykes Brothers ships ended up in Port Arthur, Texas, looking for a second mate. And as a Group C member, I took the job with Jack Dempsey as captain. 3 days later, they sent down a new master and pulled Jack off the ship. They didn't touch the woman. The National Organization of Women actually got involved and wrote a letter to the president of Lykes. And Jack was so furious, he at first called Lykes and said, we both just quit. And then he called the union to tell him what happened. And they said, did you sign anything? Nope. Call him up and tell him you don't quit. We want to fight this. And they did. They went to arbitration. Jack had to stay off the ship. I was on the ship making a Mediterranean trip coming back. I only had a 120-day job. once you reach the 120 days, you must vacate and clear your vacation before you can continue working. And the ship came in, I was eligible to take a hardship. I took one trip off and they argued. Jack was staying with my parents in Connecticut. Arbitration was happening in New York. Likes wasn't showing up for the hearings. And came time for for me to rejoin the ship. And at that point, it had returned to the Great Lakes. And the union said, Jack, pack your bags. You're going up there with Debbie. And that ship's not sailing until you're reinstated. They argued for 3 days and came time to sail the ship from Chicago. Of course, Jack Dempsey was reinstated. And as it turns out, what they were throwing at us was the Blue Book under the chapter of passengers, that no female relative or spouse of the officers or crew could be transported on the same vessel. Well, of course, you know, I wasn't being transported. I was part of the crew. I was on those articles. And we made the trip to the Med and back. The other mates on the ship were all friends of ours. And the first question, and only question that Ernie Hendricks asked Jack when we came back into the Great Lakes, when you have to call into the company, was how many mates are getting off, expecting all of them wanting to pile off. And Jack said, none, they're all making another trip. That was the end of the story. And actually Ernie Hendricks was asked to retire. And Likes kind of did a 180 and went out of their way to help me get trips in with Jack. I couldn't have the permanent position because I didn't have the union seniority, but now and then I sailed chief mate. And of course, when I started sailing master, they said, we only need one master. Thank you very much. The motor vessel Lyra has quite a story. This ship, after its tour in the Persian Gulf crisis, and after that was over, was bought by the US government for their ready reserve fleet. They realized that this type of ship, the roll-on, roll-off model, was what that was lacking within their ready reserve fleet. And this was the first to go. And I think they bought about 12 that year. The stipulation in the sale was that the ship would go through its last dry docking in Baltimore and then somehow get to New Orleans and be delivered to the military, to the US government in New Orleans. Well, Likes Brothers Steamship Company decided to save, what, $150,000? I don't know, and tow the vessel from Baltimore to New Orleans. And myself, the chief engineer and first assistant engineer, rode this dead ship under tow. Somebody had to be on the ship to ride it to the mouth of the Chesapeake, where then you were taken off and the ship would proceed under tow, but with nobody on board, to the mouth of the Mississippi River. And then somebody would have to get on the ship and ride it up the Mississippi River. Before we were taken off, and the rudders welded in place, everything is, you know, you can't just go turn the key and start it up. Here, you can see the tow cable. I don't know if you can see going down the port side, perhaps towards the after end here, you can see draping another cable. This is the emergency tow cable in case this one parted. And you can also see perhaps this line coming down, and that is a white float. Theory being, if this breaks, the tug can get a hold of this float line and pull this emergency tow cable off and reattach. So this was a sunny Sunday afternoon. I went back at that point in time, Jack and I were living in Kilmarnock, Virginia. And the phone rang about 7:30 Tuesday morning, asking me how fast I could get to Wilmington, Delaware, North Carolina. And what happened was the ship had parted its tow off of Cape Fear there, off of Wilmington. And the ship had been sold with half its capacity for fuel oil. And of course, the concern was that it would go up on the Outer Banks and cause a huge oil spill. So I was flown down to Wilmington, and the Marines met us and flew 4 of us out to this ship. I'd never been in a helicopter before in my life. And as we're going out, the weather's quite lousy, you know, and the pilot of the helicopter actually turned around. We all got the headsets on and the helmets. And he said to me, "This is the worst weather I've ever flown in," with a grin on his face. And this is what we saw. So sure as shoot, the motor vessel Lyra broke its tow about 50 miles off the coast. My instructions were, don't do anything, it's too dangerous. Land, anchor the ship, get off. Land, anchor the ship, do whatever you have to do. There was a Coast Guard cutter out there standing by this vessel adrift, and along with the tow. And when we got there, I was the first to go down, and how they lower you to the deck, and bear in mind this deck is, you know, the ship's doing a pretty good roll. It's in a stiff condition, stiff being most of the weight's in the bottom, and doing snap rolls because of all the fuel oil. And you go down in a basket, you're sitting in this basket and you hit the deck and you jump out. Well, the port engineers came down, and one of them hit the deck pretty hard. And he was hurt, and he said, "I'm not going back up in that basket. I'm not going back up. We're staying." So that was an easy decision to make, which I said, we're staying. This is it. And then we had to go to work, and you can't go start the main engine or anything like that, but you do have emergency generators. By the time we were put on board, we were 30 miles off the coast. And the ship would not, this is in January, so it gets dark pretty early, as you know. These winter days are short and the nights are long. So they started up the emergency generator. And why did we need the emergency generator? Why can't we just go drop these anchors? Because you're in over 100 feet of water. You go drop a 5-ton anchor connected to chain that weighs another 3 tons every 90 feet, which is 1 shot. And you've got about 10 or 11 shots of chain on each anchor. You won't be able to stop it. You have to lower the anchor under power to about 30 feet off the bottom, disengage it, put it on the brake, and then drop it and let out whatever amount of chain you want to let out. So they got the emergency generator going. All the lights come on. You could hear everybody on the Coast Guard cutter cheering and blowing their whistle. And we lowered the port anchor properly, the chief mate and I. Lowered the port anchor, got that out, got about 5 shots or so out on that. And then there's no way we would have survived with just 1 anchor. I'd never anchored a ship before in my life with 2 anchors. We go to let go the starboard anchor, and we start to lower that, and all the lights go out. What had happened was the port engineers had fried the emergency generator. So we had no power. And we're up here on the bow with a 3-cell flashlight in our mouths and working like that. So we decided to let the starboard anchor go, not under power, but just free fall. And it was hard to stop. You've got a big hunk of, you know, a U-shaped stop that you throw down, and that comes up against a link of chain and stops it right there. You run the risk of that either snapping the chain, taking you and everybody else off the deck or doing what it's designed to do. And the riding paw did just that. And we ended up with about 7 shots of chain out on the starboard anchor. And that's where we sat. We did ask the tugboat, you can see the float back here. Obviously, he never got to it. Why didn't you pick up the emergency tow cable? Why didn't you pick up the float and thereby the emergency tow cable? The tug himself was in extremis. They had a flooded out steering gear room, and so they were pretty much out of commission too. We sat on this ship for several days. The weather calmed down. Of course, the surveyors were coming out, and by the time we got her anchored, we were only 18 miles off the coast. She would not have survived the night. We ended up getting hooked up to, they were bringing out another towboat out of Charleston, and they came and did hook up to the emergency tow cable. And I talked them into hooking up to that emergency tow cable because it was getting dark before we had the anchors picked up. Now, bear in mind, this ship's been out there swinging on these 2 anchors for days. And the risk of these being entangled. And it was easy to pick up the port anchor, but hanging on the port anchor chain was the starboard anchor. How do you get an anchor, a 5-ton anchor, off a hunk of chain? Well, you put the brake on, disengage it, and whoosh, let it hit the bottom. Hopefully it knocks it off. You pick up the chain, engage, and pick it up again, and hadn't knocked it off, but it had moved it. We did that about 3 times, and finally it threw the starboard anchor off the chain. Then you go to pick up the starboard anchor and do the same darn thing with that too. But the tugboats were mighty upset that they had committed, because once they had hooked up to the tow cable, they were committed. And they towed us into Charleston, and it happened to be Super Bowl Sunday. And we got in there and we're wearing the same clothes that we've been wearing for 3 days. And the Coast Guard greeted us at 4 o'clock in the morning and grilled us. But what the heck? When the helicopters that were coming out, we had one of the port engineers had a medical bag, and he asked on one of the trips that they bring out his medical bag. He had to take his medicine. Well, what was really in that medical bag was a bottle of Black Bushmills. I eventually left going to sea. I was actively recruited I ended up being actively recruited by the Columbia River bar pilots. In 1993, they were under the gun of the Oregon State Legislature. It was Joan Dukes was a state senator that found out about these pilot groups. That was a pretty, they're known for nepotism. They're known for nice salaries. The Columbia River bar pilots are one of the few that nepotism is not allowed. And she looked into it and started asking the question, where are your minorities? Well, we don't have any. And there's probably fewer than 2,000 ship pilots in the United States, East Coast, Gulf Coast, West Coast. And of those, we might be up to 3% are women today. And they're few and far between. And the problem with being a pilot is it really takes, you can only become a pilot. In your career, you only have time to become a pilot in one location, one pilotage ground. The training that goes into that pilotage ground is pretty intensive. And the requirements for it are pretty high up the ladder in the Merchant Marine. The Columbia River bar pilots, we are heavy weather specialists, requires the most seagoing experience, perhaps of any pilotage organization in the world. And that is 2 years offshore sea time on your unlimited master's license. And in order to get that time in, you're looking at 15, 18 years of going to sea. But I did. I was actively recruited in the, I'd been looking at pilotage on the East Coast, but quite frankly, my age was beginning to work against me since I'm from the East Coast. And this is one of the few places where your sea time really is your training platform. So when people ask me what I do, I climb ladders. The ladders just happen to be hanging over the side of the ship, moving around. You know, this is actually inside in Astoria. The Columbia Bar Pilots Association is based in Astoria. I don't know if you know it, folks, but only someone that lived 22 years in Astoria, Oregon can appreciate the lack of rain in Bellingham. Astoria happens to be the second wettest, rainiest, and cloudiest city in the continental USA. We get about, course of 5 months, maybe 100 inches of rain. And being from New England, I know about hurricanes. But out here, you don't call them hurricanes, you just call them low pressure systems. You know, it might be blowing 120 knots, but it's not a hurricane, it's just a Pineapple Express. Well, this is how they used to work the Columbia River Bar and get on and off the ships. They rowed the pilot alongside the ship and retrieved them. Actually, when I started there was a boat operator by the name of Donnie Nelson. He was a big bear of a guy, and he used to row those pilots. He was still working when I got there and retired. He's no longer with us. But man, what a wonderful, wonderful human being. If you all, go to Astoria, there's a really fine maritime museum there, the Columbia River Maritime Museum, and they have quite an exhibit about crossing the bar. There's 3 screens set up, and if you watch all 3 at once, don't blame me, you can literally get seasick. So, what really, in 1967, the Columbia Bar pilots brought on the Peacock. The Peacock is a North Sea rescue boat, and it was brought to the Columbia River on the tail end of a ship. And this was retired in the year 2000. When I worked there, we were still using the Peacock. Note its rounded sides. It can't go alongside the ships. What does go alongside the ship is this daughter boat. You'd have the ship make a lee and 4 knots, only 4 knots, that's not much, and get in the lee of the ship, launch the daughter boat. Oh, excuse me. I didn't know I could. Oops. Oops. Sorry. How do I go backwards here?
Can you just press the back arrow on your keyboard?
Yes. Thank you, whoever spoke up. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
I'm sorry. You get in the daughter boat and in 4 knots and climb up. And of course, the Peacock was only used for the roughest of weather. But it did allow the bar pilots to keep the bar open more. And the diesel smell inside this, it's like being on a submarine, quite frankly, in there. And the diesel smell was horrific, and nobody really enjoyed being on the Peacock. You're out there in the roughest of weather. And sometimes you had to stay out there. Sometimes you couldn't get back across the bar. And, or you had to wait for an inbound ship and work that. One of the risks of using the daughter boat is going alongside, the pilot ladder's hanging down, and you have to time it. So the ship's going, rolling, everything's in motion. The ladder's in motion, leaving the side of the ship's rolling back and forth, the pilot boat's rolling back and forth, or the daughter boat, and you're in this little daughter boat, and you get up in front of the console, and you're standing there, and you get alongside, and you got to time it that you get off at the crest, hopefully where it's falling from the crest, onto the ladder, and skedaddle up. What you don't want to do is get on that ladder too soon and have that daughter boat ride up on the back of your legs. That happened to me once, and the boat operator was so furious with me with the thought that he had injured me. But I was not hurt. I was just lucky. So at the Columbia River Maritime Museum, the pilot boat Peacock, we donated it to the museum, and it's outside the museum. This is the type of pilot boat they use now. These are aluminum hulled boats, actually built in Puget in Seattle. They have two of them. And this is a 30-knot boat, jet engine, only draws 3 feet, aluminum hulled. It is like a cork out there. We actually had seat belts to keep us in our seats. And, you can't do 30 knots when the weather's kicking butt. So it still takes you quite a while to get out across the bar. But the fast run boats came to the Columbia River bar pilots along with the helicopter, which we started experimenting with and brought online in, I believe, 2005. These are 76-foot long boats. And we used to, when I first got there, we only had the boat operator. We did not have a deckhand, but they do now have a deckhand who's out on the bow of the boat when you embark and disembark. They have two of these hotshot pilot boats. I had to pilot Paul Allen's yacht in once, 300-foot private yacht, and he actually had a Kiwi New Zealand crew on board. He was not on board. I think there were only 7 on board when they came into the Columbia River. And what we had to watch out for was the mast hitting. There's a sailboat that was overhanging where it was stored on the upper deck and hitting that boat. But how do you use a pilot boat? You match the speed of the ship. And the cool thing about using the helicopter and these fast run boats, the best speed for these jet engine boats actually is 11 knots to be moving. I have worked a ship with the pilot boat doing about 14 knots. With the helicopter, the container ships and the car ships love it because they can stay up at speed being 22, 24 knots for the container ships, 18 knots for the car ships. Of course, we have to slow them down once we get inside the river, but they do like it. I once had to pilot out a Navy experimental craft that was coming down from Portland, probably the shipyard, and it was a catamaran. And I get up to the bridge, and the Navy captain says to me, "What kind of speed do you want?" And of course, my response was, "What do you got?" And he showed me, and it was going by so fast. It was something else. I think we got up close to, if we were over 30 knots, between 30 and 50 knots. We actually had to slow down so the helicopter could catch up with us outside the bar. You don't get to do that very often. Another cool job that I didn't happen to have was when the Coast Guard Eagle came in, putting a pilot onto the tall ship. So we used to get Navy ships now and then when they came in, especially from the San Diego naval station there. They would do it as an exercise coming up into Portland for the Rose Festival. And it's always in June, and it's just continuous. Before we had the sleep requirement rules go into effect, where you have to be down for 9 hours, you could come back to the office and go right back out, especially during Rose Festival. Just a Navy ship after Navy ship, in and then back out. I once piloted a submarine into the port of Astoria. And working a Navy ship, you go up on that tiny bridge. The bridges on the Navy ships are pretty small. And there's 22 people. And of course, I'd go up and ask them, you got room for one more? And it's an exercise from them. So you kind of just oversee things and let them do the navigation. Disembarking. This is how you do it. These are called, I hate to say it, these are called man ropes. These are 3 inches in circumference manila. And you want manila, you don't want poly, because you can grip them. My last trip to sea was the summer of 1994. We, on a container ship, actually went into Lisbon, was my last foreign port as captain. And I actually got a taste of big seas going into Lisbon. That's where the surfers like to go, with those 100-foot seas. But I had the boatswain rig up on the aft end of the house a pilot ladder with some man ropes. And so I was going to practice, get experience before I joined the Columbia Bar pilots. And I'm up, coming down the ladder, get on the ladder, grab the man ropes, come down, and I went and hit the deck and broke a toe. The boatswain had not used manila. He had used poly. But what you do is you swing out from the ladder, kick off the ladder when you're 6 to 9 feet above the deck of the boat, and you swing out, slide down the man ropes, and hit the deck of the pilot boat, or hopefully land on the deck of the pilot boat. The thing about it is, again, you need to time it. And you watch it before you even get on the ladder up there at the stanchions. Before you get on up here, you watch the motion of the pilot boat and all that, and time your kicking off the ladder, and watch it again from the ladder before you make your move to kick off, swing out, fall down the man ropes to the deck. And again, you want to time it, not when the boat's coming up, but when it's at the height of the crest and just falling away, and you fall away with it. I must admit, if you're a Columbia Bar pilot, what's going to drive you into retirement before anything else are your knees. And I often think I should have been a darn yoga instructor. I'd be skiing some alpine today instead of just cross-country skiing. But anyway, I did this. One night, I was disembarking a loaded Greek ship, and conditions were not bad. This was in 2012, but it's at night. When do accidents happen? All accidents happen at night. We actually lost a pilot, a friend of mine who was in the class behind me at Maine Maritime Academy. He was Maine, born and raised in Maine, had a wicked Maine accent, which I used to love to hear on the radio. You know, the A's at the end of the words become ER, you know, Linder. And it's just, and unfortunately, Kevin Murray disembarked, and the conditions were so horrific that even the Coast Guard couldn't get out across the bar. And he landed in the drink. And what we think happened was he got hit on the head by that yellow pilot boat, the aluminum hulled boats that are so lively out there, it literally is like a cork. His body was found 2 days later up on the Washington coast. I myself, disembarking a Greek ship, loaded Greek ship, I must admit, I was pretty annoyed with the captain for whatever reasons, probably because I'm a woman. And I couldn't wait to get off that ship. And when I was training, I trained with a wonderful pilot by the name of Jim McAvoy, and I literally took his place on the roster. But he taught me a good lesson. Do not leave the bridge without retying your shoes. And why? It's the last thing you do, but it makes you mindful of your feet. And that particular night is one of the few times I did not retie my shoes. And when I, as a pilot, was working with applicants and training them, I too passed on that lesson. And I'm happy to report that today they do that. I landed in the drink. It was only about 10 foot. It was not a bad night. It is in the middle of the night. It's like 1:40 in the morning. And what happens is the ship, drops from the bridge wing way up here, a life ring that's attached to an orange smoke. Luckily, it did not hit me on the head. I did a kind of an experiment, put my arm out to see if I could even touch the ship, which I couldn't. You don't get your head wet because you got a float coat on. But you quickly become a stationary object back here. You fall between the ship and the pilot. But bear in mind, they're moving at 11 knots, and you all of a sudden are a stationary object. I kind of looked at the lights, and the ship actually did go down and got to a position where he could turn around and come back. But the pilot boat went into action for retrieving a pilot in the water. We do drills, of course. When do you do the drills? You rarely do them at night. So there's a line coiled up inside a bag that they throw at you, and you are to grab this bag and pull it. And at the other end of it is a horseshoe collar. You put that horseshoe underneath your arms. They hook the line up over the davit that's on, the boom, and the mast for that davit is on the deck of the pilot boat, which is about 7 feet of freeboard. And then they pull on the rope to assist you in climbing up the 7 feet of freeboard. That's for a conscious pilot. An unconscious pilot, as in the case with Kevin Murray, there's a basket on the tail end of these pilot boats that you can lower and kind of scoop them up. They actually had Kevin half in the basket and half out of the basket, and then a huge sea came, and they never saw him again. So in my case, they tried to get the bag to me, but they did not know that the horseshoe got caught in the jets. So they couldn't. And of course, the deckhands on the bow of the pilot boat Columbia, and he's saying to me, "We're gonna come get you, Captain Dempsey. We're gonna come get you." And of course, I'm saying, "Well, then get your asses over here." And what they had to do was they encircled me with the line and then pulled me in and had me pinned against the pilot boat as if they were hauling in a salmon. And that's the first time I actually got my head wet. I ended up going up and down with the pilot boat and getting sucked under the quarter with each, because the jets, they're not in gear, but they're still throwing up a lot of froth there. And I would kick out from underneath the pilot boat. Those hiking boots that I had on that night, I actually still have. And on them is that blue bottom paint is still there. And I told him, you got to stop this. This is going to kill me. I said, put the basket down. I'll climb onto the basket. They even put a boat hook out or something like that. I grabbed the end of that and promptly bent that in right angles. And I got onto the basket, and all this time I'm hanging on to my glasses and my pilot bag. In my pilot bag is a couple $1,000s worth of equipment. And it's the last item I had for my BMF, best male friend, Captain Paul Jackson, who happened to be president of the bar pilots when I got the call to recruit me, which happened on April Fool's Day, 1994. But Paul and I became very good friends, and he dropped dead of a heart attack on the ship ahead of me, October 19th, 2003, 2 weeks after I lost my mom. And I had his pilot bag. And so I've got that here. I've got my glasses. These two burly guys, the boat operator and the deckhand, haul me up, one on one side, one on the other. Whoosh, go my glasses, whoosh, goes my pilot bag. And the shore side thought I was in the water 20 minutes. The pilot boat thought I was only in the water 5 minutes. But the radio communications show that I actually was in the water 11 minutes. And I can tell you, I was talking a blue streak when they had me in that boat. Of course, you take off all your clothes and get in a warm blanketed bag and all that. And the ambulance is waiting for you back in Hammond, where the pilot boats are. And when I got to the ambulance, they gave me a cup of hot water, and then they decided to take my temperature. And they couldn't get a read orally or under my arm or whatever, so they never really did. And I guess you're supposed to do it another way, but they didn't do that. And the phone call that your partner never wants to have is that you've been in the water. The last thing a pilot wants to do is be in the drink, go in the drink. So I was lucky to be alive. The conditions were not that bad, but water temps pretty cold as it is here. Helicopters. So now they actually own a helicopter. When I was still there, we chartered had a lease on a helicopter. But 70% of the transfers are done by helicopter. 30% of those transfers are land-ons, which the helicopter pilots love, because you just come in, land, whoosh, pilot jumps out, and helicopter takes off. When you have to hover in position and lower the pilot, helicopters do not drop pilots. They only lower pilots. And you can really be buffeted, especially if you're working something like a container ship and you're being put down between two big stacks onto a bay that's empty between them. We've had pilots really swing into containers and get hurt. Not very often, but yeah. And another way that you can land on a ship is to be put on the bridge wing. I love that. You have them secure the radar, and if it's flat seas like what you see here, and it happens to be a container ship, something like that, they just lower you down onto the bridge wing as if you're some Broadway star or something. And this is the Port of Astoria. For those that you haven't been there, I recommend. My favorite weekend of the whole year is the last weekend in February, which happens to be the Fisher Poets gathering. It's wonderful. And I believe they're doing it virtually this year, so you all can attend from up here. But this is a cruise ship, and we get these cruise ships when they're transferring their trade from the Caribbean up to Alaska in May, or when they're transferring back in the fall and September. And the thing about a cruise ship, and they're only here for the day, they come in at 7 o'clock in the morning or something, and Astoria would really put on a good show for them. Astoria is a small town of about 10,000 people, but the high school band would be there to greet the ship, and they'd have car service to take passengers to Mount St. Helens, or take the crew shopping over to Fred Meyer's in Warrenton, things like that. And it was really, really nice. And one day we had 3 of these cruise ships in here. We had one anchored. This is the Maritime Museum over here. Anchored right off the Maritime Museum. They were shuttling them back and forth. And then we had the second cruise ship right in here. And we, for a day, doubled the population in Astoria, Oregon. The thing about a cruise ship, they have azopods, and lots of them. And the captain actually doesn't want the pilot to handle the azopods. And the reason they have all these is to do away with tugs. But if you get a good wind holding that ship on the dock, there's no way you're going to get off the dock, even with the azopods. So as pilot there, it's kind of fun to do a cruise ship. It's like a big floating hotel, of course. And in the bridge, it's so quiet. And of course, you're used to barking orders. And Mayor might say, I'm still used to it. But in the bridge, it's so quiet. You holler out, half ahead, and you go, oh my God, everybody just looks at you as if, you don't need to talk so loudly. And of course, my voice is quite deep. It served me well. This is what's called a Panamax ship. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's another hatch back here. 7 hatches. These ships are 748 feet long, 105 feet wide, and they literally fit the old Panama Canal locks. And you'd have a pilot on either side going through the Panama Canal with what's the lock width was 115 feet. So the one of the tricks, or one thing I missed about being a Columbia River bar pilot, was the lack of docking and undockings that we did. Sure, we did. We put log ships in here. We put cruise ships in here and stuff. The log ships take a lot more seamanship than the cruise ship does. But going into the Port of Seattle or Port of Portland, they do a lot of dockings and undockings, and that's really fun. That's fun driving of a ship. Here, for a bar pilot, one of the toughest things to do is the anchoring that we do. Maybe last up here. And the channel goes through. The Columbia River is only 600 feet wide, okay? It's now dredged to 43-foot depth. That happened while I was there. Out on the bar, the channel breadth is 1,200 feet wide and dredged to 55 feet. You start paying attention when you get 20-foot seas out there, 18-foot seas, of not taking a ship that's drawing 40 feet out across the bar. If you start pitching, and they did have, before I got there, a ship that actually struck bottom, drove the rudder post right up through it. So I experienced on the Columbia River bar going out one night in pretty bad conditions. The need to turn the ship around on the bar. I was literally going backwards And I've only done that once in my 22 years. I only saw one other pilot do it. That was on an empty ship. The ship I was on was actually drawn 36 feet. But I've worked in 28-foot breakers on the bar. Anchoring a Panamax 748 feet on a flood tide, about 4 or 5 knots tide, with 50 knots of wind blowing up your butt, is a tough thing to do. There's no bow thrusters, all you recreational boaters. There's no bow thrusters on these bulkers. These are slow speed diesels, 13 knotters, very economical. And so how do you anchor it? You lose your steerage once you take off your speed, and you drop the anchor and you literally turn on the anchor. You're still moving forward, but you turn, you drop the anchor, chain's gonna run out, but it's pretty shallow. It's not that deep there. We would anchor those Panamax with 7 shots of chain. That's 90 feet per shot. 7 shots of chain is a lot. And the reason you do it is because of the current. On the ebb current, spring freshet, that current's running 6 to 7 knots. It's the only place I've ever worked where the ebb lasts another 2 hours after low water. It's really, really quite amazing. You have to be careful about anchoring a Panamax. You don't anchor it too close. You can only anchor them on the north side. There's not enough room for them to swing on the south side. You anchor them on the north side. If you anchor them too far north, just a couple of hundredths of a mile, too far north, when they turn, they're going to go aground. You anchor them too far south, when they turn, they block the channel. Here's a hot shot container ship. And this is where, if you landed on the bridge wing, the pilot, the helicopter would let you down. Car ships. Car ships are so ugly. And they don't draw much water. They only draw about 28 feet of water. So they're hard to handle on a there's so much windage, that sail area, that on the bar you could put on 40 degrees of leeway just to maintain that 225 exit, go down the center of the, you can be crabbing all the way down. But this is on a wire. Obviously, container ships and car ships, you can only work the helicopter with a wire. There's about 12 decks inside of these, and some of them are telescopic decks. It's pretty cool. We brought in one that had quite a list. Had been up in the Gulf of Alaska and ended up with that permanent list with all the cars. There's only a 4-point tie down on these cars. They try to leave room, an alleyway, just for getting the pilot on and off. And as they load these cars, they 2 fist lengths away, they turn the mirrors in, and they keep working their way out to the skin of the ship from one side to the other. You don't want to be in the way in the port of these being driven on or off. Log ships, mostly from the port of Longview. And it used to be that all logs were going to Japan. But when I was there, they started loading in Astoria, and those were going to China. So working a log ship with a helicopter, the problem here, you really had to wear goggles and stuff, because the bark debris really gets swirled up by the rotor. You couldn't use the helicopter. You had to be careful. You couldn't use it with a passenger ship, because they had chairs that they would upset up there on those upper decks. Oops. This is what it looks like, how they tie down the logs of the ship. And these are very slippery. We'd actually put on like yak tracks on the bottom of our boots to hold our footing. Here's the channel. going up. So this is these are Panamax anchored here. We once had we used to, until Coast Guard wouldn't let us do it anymore. Here's a ship going up. So these are anchored on the edge of the south side, and these are anchored on the edge of the channel on the north side. If the bar was closed, and it's the bar pilots that close the bar, it's not the Coast Guard, it's the bar pilots that close the bar. We make the determination, a number one pilot. There's no senior pilot, nothing like that. We all get paid to the penny, the exact same. When I first arrived at the bar pilots, one of my fellow bar pilots complained, she's going to get the same that I'm going to get? Really? And you know, I used to think I could really help the relationship of this one woman coming to the bar pilots. You know, I could really melt the ice here. I can do that. So I had a sense of humor, you know? So over the Christmas side, I found this beeper that's light sensitive. So I put it on the underside. There's only one bathroom, and the sign outside said gentlemen. So I put the beeper on the underside of the toilet seat. When you left the seat up, of course, it started beeping. Well, unfortunately, the office manager, who was a friend of mine, was a woman, Harriet Hansen. Poor thing. She was in there trying with a spatula to get that beeper off, because that same pilot that wondered why I got paid the same actually tied the seat up. Do you think that stopped me? Nah. I dressed it up in pink. I got a pink rug, pink tank, and then I stopped because I realized these guys aren't laughing. Here's what that ebb current looks like. This is buoy 14, and sometimes this buoy can be underwater with the current so strong. You know, you want to be going in the right direction with the ship, where it takes you a while to get in on those 13 knotters. Sometimes when you go by buoy 14 at night and it's underwater, it's so cool because the light would still be flashing even underwater. This happens in August. This is what's called buoy 10 fishing. This is buoy 10 right there. Try to pick that out on a radar in poor visibility. On the opposite side of the channel is a yellow buoy, and from sun up to sundown, which is the only time you can fish, you can't go seaward of that line. So everybody is right there. And this is for salmon. This is salmon fishing, right? So how do you get through all this? You got the whistle blowing, you know, and you're really being given the international signal as you go by, or they're reeling in whatever they're hooked on, the almighty salmon, and it's a rule, all salmon are in the main ship channel, reeling it in, and as you're getting closer and closer, their eyes are going higher and higher. And eventually they might get out of the way, you're blowing the whistle, or our pilot boat, and the Coast Guard used to actually lead us through and clear a path for us through the boats. And but when they get going, it's so amazing. It's like there's a big magnet on the bow of the ship. They always have to take your bow. They can't take your stern. They got to take your bow. Do this in pea soup fog, you know, and the poor captain. And of course, I'd always ease the captain's concern and just turn down the range on the radar and get rid of a lot of the targets. This is a calm day on the bar. This is kicking up a little bit. Not bad. This is coming in with those quartering seas. This is big seas. And when you're coming in like this with a ship like this, you are yawing. You can yaw 40 degrees either side of your course. It is just amazing. This is a heavy lift ship. These are small ships, but they're kind of fun. Small and not too many of crew, but those cranes can really lift like 500 tons or so. They would move big generators. They kind of, you know, they don't have a schedule. They're tramps. They just go from port to port. One thing the Columbia River bar pilots guarantee, but we don't charge for, is a deck washdown. How the heck did I get off this ship? Well, if you look right back here on the port side, right there, I'd just been picked up by the helicopter before it dipped, took this good sized sea. Climbing ladders. That BMF of mine, Captain Paul Jackson, used to ask me, he'd go to all my talks and he'd be out there waving his hand and saying, Captain Dempsey, what have you done lately? And so, of course, what Mary and I have done lately is, I guess 14 years ago, we were two of the founders of the Community Boating Center, beloved Community Boating Center. And I see a lot of pals of the Boating Center in the audience this evening. This is what we inherited. We took over Fairhaven Boat Works. See all these boats on 55-gallon drums? They certainly weren't going anywhere anytime soon. These are the tools we got. But this is kind of what it looks like today. So lots of wonderful programs, all about, there's probably 90% of the population in Bellingham that doesn't know how to use their backyard, the backyard being Bellingham Bay. And that's why we exist. We'll teach you. It's all hand launched stuff, sail, paddle, row, youth camps, bioluminescence paddles, adult classes, racing sailboats, got great dinghies, J24s, kayaks, rowboats, fixed seat, sliding seat. It's a wonderful addition to the community of Bellingham. There's nothing better than seeing a smile like this for a youngster that's never ever been on the water before, much less in a kayak. So I'm going to leave it there and open it up to questions. And I really, really, really apologize. But I warned Alicia, Frank, and John that once I get telling sea stories, I can go on forever. So I apologize. It's very late.
I think I can speak for the crowd in that, yeah, no problem. Those have been amazing stories you shared. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Alicia, do we have any, how do you want to handle the questions? You want to read them out, or should we?
I can tell you all one thing. Speaking of sea stories, do you all know the difference between a fairy tale and a sea story? Frank, do you?
I do not.
A fairy tale starts out once upon a time. And of course, these sea stories start out, this is no shit.
That is true. I do know that. That's good. So yeah, Alicia, how do you want to do the questions?
We got one question through the chat, which was from Nicole. So I don't know if she wants to go ahead and ask that, and then we can start having people raise their hands. And I will call on you, and then you can unmute when it's your turn. If that sounds okay.
Okay. Well, Nicole here. Thank you, Captain Dempsey, for your stories. I was totally mesmerized and learned a lot. I had to keep Wikipediaing some words. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about just the physicality of the job and, you know, the intelligence that it takes to know the waters to navigate. But if it's not paired with agility, have you seen future pilots just have to turn away, or something in their, I don't know, later in life that causes them to stop? That's been hard for the, I don't know, career path.
Yes. I actually had occasion, we were training, and everybody's a shipmaster that comes to the Columbia River Bar to join the pilots. And this poor gentleman, and it takes a lot for you to be selected to be a Columbia River bar pilot. I mean, you have to compete, you have to, you used to be interviewed by the boys. Oh my God. I was the last one to do that. And of course I showed up, I didn't show up in suit coat and all that. I showed up in khakis, ready to ride ships, right? Oops.
Good.
And, but then the state took it over. That's one thing the state did, was to make it more objective instead of subjective. And when they did that, we go to Seattle to Pacific Maritime Institute. We use the simulator, and there's a written exam, and that's helped. And there's a big interview, and you get graded and rated and all that good stuff, and you can stay on the list for so long. And it costs money to do that. But, and this poor gentleman, this poor captain, he got himself in position and started training in the fall. And it was hellacious weather in November. He lost 30 pounds. He was scared to death. And he would come in there. He was used to working a tanker on the US coast, not these foreign flag ships. You know, they're old. Some of them are older, not all of them. They're all have the proper equipment, but it's all different equipment. You know, it's different radars, it's different crews. You're required to speak English, but it doesn't have to be the captain. Somebody on that bridge has to speak English. And so it's a challenge. And the poor guy, and I had him and his wife come up to my house one night for dinner because I could tell he was not doing well. And he told me he was going to quit. I was shocked. You know,
No.
Really? You're going to give this up? Take some time off and then decide. He took some time off and decided he couldn't go back sailing as captain. He had to work his way back up. He started out as second mate again. But I really, really applauded him for his recognizing that. Another one got to where, you know, it was about his last training trip, and he decided it wasn't for him as well. And his wife is the one that kept threatening to sue us because Tim was never really selected, but finally made it. So yeah, you know, it's something for someone not to step into the shoes of being a pilot.
Looks like
Wow,
we
thank
have a
you.
question from Penelope in the chat, if she wants to unmute and ask that.
Remind me, Frank, I want to share with them what the rescue of the Lyra earned, and some books and videos and stuff, all right?
I will do that.
So, Captain Dempsey, I loved your stories. They're just great. Having been out in the water in the Aleutians, I can really relate to some of that. I was a woman alone on a lot of ships, and I wonder if you could share some stories about how you got those men to come around to your way of thinking.
Being.
Well, when I was a cadet, I loved working with the boatswain, and when they knew I could wire
Good
splice,
call.
I used to, when I was at Maine Maritime Academy, earn $30 a wire splice, which I actually learned at the school. I'd go out on the scallop boats, and they had draggers, and they'd break their, I loved it, you know, they told me I could only eat every 10th one. But wire splicing, so helping the boats, you know, getting myself totally dirty and just being eyes and ears open, like Lou Hathaway, one of my professors, told all of us, when you go out there, keep your mouth shut and your eyes and ears open. But
Yeah.
easy for me just to want to learn, and when I ended up in the ranks, third mate, second mate, chief mate, master, I too so appreciated the cadets that were just anxious to absorb as much as they could and learn. And you really learn with a couple of months on a commercial ship versus the training ship, which is all the cadets. And
Oh, yeah.
So it was, but as a third mate, you know, I would bust my butt out there on deck and things like that with the deck crew. And I had some of the other mates tell me, you're going to ruin it for the rest of us. So I can relate to, but they just, you know, every new mate that comes aboard the ship, every new officer that comes aboard the ship is going to get tested by the crew. And if you survive that, you're all right. And as it turns out, Ernie Hendricks is the one that rigged my going as second mate on my first job as second mate on the Amy Likes with Jack Dempsey, because he said, if she survives that, she's all right.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
We had a question from Kathy Cloutier. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Kathy?
Yeah, Deb, I was wondering your description of the problems on the Lyra, and you said the power had gone out. You got aboard and the generators went out. How did you get the anchors up and down?
Good question. That's a long story, and that it happens to be chapter 1. That story of the rescue of the Lyra. And they brought another generator out to us. And first they tried to bring it out on a boat, but the boat was moving around so much. We were hauling up the extension cord, right? That it broke all the filters or diaphragms or something. And then they had to put one on deck by helicopter. He had this big helicopter that lowered a generator to our deck that we ran power to get our mains started up.
Okay. All right, thanks.
It was quite the story. And actually, a lot of the rescue of the Lyra, thanks for bringing that up, won every single award that's possible within the United States Merchant Marine. The AOTUS Award, Admiral of the Ocean Seas Award. And this is, of course, who's the Admiral of the Ocean Sea? Christopher Columbus. I'm an FOB. I got presented to me by the president of Likes Brothers Steamship Company. I'm a friend of Bill Clinton's. This is a letter from the president on the successful rescue of the Lyra. We were approached to do a movie, but I think Jack wanted Robert Duvall to play him, and Sigourney Weaver was going to play me, but it was too expensive. Ships and storms are too expensive, so it never happened.
Julie, I see you got your hand raised.
I do. Hello, everybody. Hello, Captain Dempsey. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Julie.
I'm from Compass Courses.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Thank you for all your stories and taking time to share with people. And it's really great to hear them. You know, my school is celebrating 20 years in April. And through the years, I've seen a number of women in classes grow and grow. And they always come up and ask, you know, do I have any advice? And I always give my 2 cents, but could I have your 2 cents tonight, Captain, about what would you tell women who want to pursue their career in the maritime industry?
Whatever your rating is, you're assigned to that, or your level of license, unlicensed or licensed, you are necessary for that ship to operate. So whatever that is, just do the job and do the job well. You know, and that's it. And
Yeah,
you know, and it applies anywhere. Julie, that's why I love what you do, Julie, in Seattle. I so applaud you. And
Thank you.
the community boating center, you know, the discipline that you learn from being successful on the water translates across the board to everything. And it's just, you know, not very many people get to have that type of success and the confidence that it gives an individual. So yes, but you are needed on that ship for a reason, and that's what you need to fulfill, is that reason. Just do your job and do it well, and hopefully love it. You know, there is camaraderie. I think when I was going to sea, there was more camaraderie because we had the reel-to-reel movies. Now everybody's got their own video players in their room, and we used to have barbecues. You know, we sent the cadets ashore in Alexandria, Egypt to go get a goat, and sure as shoot, they came back with a goat, and the chief engineer butchered it, and we cooked it up with the passengers and did stuff like that, you know, which I don't think they get the opportunity to do these days. I think
Yeah,
the bottom line is what it's all about today. I don't know if it's quite as much fun. The tankers, the U.S. flag tankers that would come into, you get me going, Julie, I'm really sorry. The U.S. flag tankers that would come into the Columbia River would be nervous wrecks, and only 2% of the trade that comes in is U.S. flag. 98% of the trade is foreign flag. I loved it. I loved getting to know foreign crews that came in repeatedly. But after the Exxon Valdez accident, what came down as far as the requirements are really severe, and so they're all nervous wrecks on there. It's not, I don't know how much fun it is, you know, and being on a liner service, container ships or car ships, having to maintain that schedule, you know, keep the ship moving, never mind the weather. So,
Well, great advice. Thank you. I'll quote you for sure.
okay,
Thank you.
you bet.
Looks
There
like
was one question. I'm sorry, Alicia, go ahead.
Craig Brown wanted to know if your book has been released recently or if it's been out for a little while.
It was out for quite a while ago. I think Jack Dempsey died in 1996, and I believe it was published in 97. I actually had to remove myself from the last 10% or so. I'm a co-author. I was giving a talk in my home out where we lived in Virginia at the time to a yacht club. And there was a journalist there who approached me about doing a book. And I always used to say, yeah. But we finally did. And there wasn't a second printing. And you want to know how I get copies of this book? Is I buy them back from Amazon. I do have a few copies. If you really want one, I'll be happy to send you one and sign it. And if you don't mind, it's a $20 donation to the Community Boating Center. It's an ebook now too. I think I framed my first royalties check. It was $1.83.
Oh, good for you. Are there any other questions? Well, Captain Dempsey. Oh.
Do we contact you through the boating center, or what would be a good way to contact you to get a book?
Absolutely. Right, Frank?
Go ahead and connect you guys directly if you don't mind, if that's okay.
What's that?
I can connect the two of you.
Yes, I don't mind. I don't mind at all.
Okay.
That would be good for me, Alicia.
Cool.
I'm such an extrovert. It's fine.
Gift Jones has a comment.
Yeah, just a quick one. What's an arzapod?
Azipod. It's
Azipod.
like a thruster, but it's 360 degrees.
Oh, got it.
You can
Thank you.
go ahead, and the more you push the lever, the more throttle. And you can turn it. You can turn it. It's really cool. This is today. And they got them on the stern. They've got them on the bow, and that's what drives that ship. And You know, it's like playing video games.
Thank you for that.
It really is.
So
And
I've got a
folks-
dumb question. But do you miss wheels on ships?
Do I miss wheels on ships?
Helm.
Yeah, helms. Sorry, the steering wheel.
There is a wheel. It's not a big one,
Okay.
but there is a wheel.
Oh, okay.
No, it's bigger than that, but
Okay.
no, there's a wheel. There's a telegraph.
Okay.
It may not be the type of telegraph that you see in the museum, but there's a telegraph on the console and everything.
Okay.
You don't punch in pilot waters. You're not on autopilot or anything like that. There's somebody steering. I used to love to get the new sailors that were coming down the river who had never been on the helm before. And the captain would always say, well, we'll go get somebody that knows how to steer. I said, no, leave him right there. How else is he going to learn how to drive?
Good point.
Because when you get out in open water, they usually put it on autopilot.
Sure.
Looks like Judy Long has her hand up. She wants to go
Yeah.
ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you bet.
Oh, I wondered, I get terribly seasick. I wondered if you have ever been seasick or if it just never bothered you.
Oh, no. I've been seasick. You want to know when? I was part of the U.S. Women's Challenge team for the Whitbread Round the World sailing race.
Wow.
And actually, our company brought back the 60-footer from Valencia, Spain to Norfolk for us on the deck of a Likes Brothers ship. And so we were doing a practice race from Newport, Rhode Island to Bermuda.
Yep.
And I was navigator, but the cook came up with the meals. And so I went down to cook and
Yeah, bad idea.
so I've been sick. I haven't been sick on the pilot boat, but I actually was working after having been in Connecticut, and I ended up with Lyme disease. And I mean, the pilots were asking me, what is wrong with you? You are beet red. And I was feeling absolutely lousy and stuff. And that's the closest I came. But I don't generally get seasick. We do have pilots that would get seasick. And they're the ones that were really campaigning to get a helicopter. I'm a boat person. When the helicopter came and we were testing it out, it literally divided our group in half. The boat people and the helicopters are expensive, but the shippers really wanted that service, and they wanted 100% service. So that's why you got two fancy dancy pilot boats backing up a helicopter.
Okay.
I feel for anybody that is seasick. I used to deliver yachts, and my crew were all my pals from University of Vermont, right? And they'd be seasick. You're not much help when you're seasick, but I am extremely empathetic.
Captain, one other question. You made a comment about the bar pilots are the ones that determine the bar closes, but you said the number one, and I didn't. Who is the number one? How did
Number
you
one,
said it wasn't like
you're on a wheel, Frank, and you're this position. You know, however many pilots are working the watch. I don't know. There's probably 15 bar pilots, and when I first started, we were 22 bar pilots. That's what the helicopter has done, is made them more efficient. So they've reduced their numbers. And every other day, a pilot would go off the rotation and someone would come on. So you start out in the wheel, and as you work your way around to number one, you are in charge. You make the shots. You close the bar, you open the bar, you help the dispatch set up ship sailings and work with the weather department, weather service and things like that.
okay.
Once you do a turn, you go to the bottom of the list. And a turn could, you're 8 hours committed to doing an outbounder, and you may wait 4 hours for the inbounder. And hopefully you're not out there on the pilot boat in rough weather, and then bring the inbounder in. And once you leave the office nowadays, we actually had sleep study done by us and done by Zeisler, who was doing it for the air traffic controllers. Remember him from Boston, MIT, I think? He did this study for us, and that's when we made it a requirement. It didn't used to be when I first started there. You must have 9 hours downtime when you leave that office before you can be called for another job. He finally got us when the day we go off our rotation, not to get in a car and drive. Yeah, most bar pilots will drive the next day for their off time.
Hmm.
It's like driving drunk.
Oh, I bet.
Yep.
I bet. Okay, any other questions we can pose to the captain here?
3 cheers. Thank you,
Well-
Captain Dempsey.
Well, it looks
Another
like she's
thing-
not done yet.
Another thing is this video is really great, and this is usually showed in March. I don't know if Julie's still there. It's Shipping Out and the Story of American Seafaring Women. It's an hour-long production on PBS, and it's all about the women that did this. Also did some that's shown on Veterans Day, the Liberty ships and the men who sailed them, and that's what got her asking, where are all the women?
Will you share that title one more time?
Shipping Out.
That I don't know.
Shipping Out, the Story of American Seafaring Women.
Thank you.
And for those of you that have 13-year-olds in your family, children, grandchildren, The Turn of the Tide is a book written by Roseanne Perry. She lives in Portland, and she approached me about doing this book. I'm the only non-fictional character in here, but it's about a 13-year-old girl, lives in Astoria, and their sailing adventures on the mighty Columbia River and how she wanted to be a bar pilot. It's quite a nice read. I think she's received some kind of awards for this book.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Frank, for the overtime.
No problem at all. No overtime. So does that then get me out of having to remind you about the books and
Yes.
video? Okay, so good.
You're off
All
the
right.
hook.
Okay, just didn't want to miss that. Okay, well, again, does anybody have any final questions to ask?
And they can keep coming, however you
Yeah.
want to get a hold of me. And if you're ever up here in Bellingham, please say hello.
Well,
You know,
I
if COVID's over, we'll go have lunch and a beer or something.
yeah. Well, I have family up in Bellingham, so when this is all over, I'm going to come up and see you and buy you a beer and buy you lunch. So I'll cover all those bases. Okay. Any other final questions for anybody for the captain?
Yeah,
Don.
I guess we have one more.
Great.
Hello, this is Don.
Come towards the screen.
Okay.
There
And I wonder if the boat where you had so much trouble with the anchors and the generators going out made it to be in the U.S. government's possession.
Oh, good question. It did. So what happened was we were in Charleston, right, over Super Bowl. Weather's nice. And the Lightsville Steamship Company decides to have the ship go the rest of the way on its own power. Steam. These are also were steamships, right, in those days. And I was the captain that brought the ship around and into the up the Mississippi River, and that's where she was turned over. Was up in New Orleans. They had quite a reception for us in New Orleans. It was really quite something. Actually, that's where the letter from Bill Clinton was given to us, and Jim Amos, president of the company, did something to make it happen at the White House. I don't know, but it was.
Can we assume they sent someone down to unweld the rudder?
Yes, yes, you can assume that. That all happened in Charleston. Yes, it did. Plus, recrewing and all that good stuff.
Fixing the generator and that kind of thing.
Yep. Emergency. Yep. Coast Guard wouldn't let us sail without everything working.